in to Greenville Grit. This is Greenville Residents in Touch with your hosts, Terry Williams and Michael Overton. This is the show that keeps you connected and in touch with the issues that affect what's happening in your community. Greenville Grit is sponsored by Greenville Toyota, the Overton Group, and Bill Clark Homes. Now, here are your hosts for Greenville Grit, Terry Williams and Michael Overton.
Welcome this evening to the Greenville Grit. I'm Terry Williams.
And I'm Michael Overton. Terry, good to see you today.
Good to see you, Michael.
Got a great show. We were supposed to have Brian Brown on the show with us today, but he got called to go to Raleigh. So we have a new special guest. We have Taylor Griffin. He is the candidate for U.S. House of Representatives District 3. And I had kind of shows you a small world speaking with a buddy of mine yesterday named Shelton Griffin. And he's like, you may know my brother. It's Taylor Griffin. It's like, wow, that's a pretty small world. So it's great to be able to get you on the show today. And we've extended the invitation to Walter Jones.
That's
and
right.
Hopefully they'll be able to maybe consider coming on next week. But I know before we get into the show, we got some sponsors to thank.
That's right. We want to thank Bill Clark Homes for being a sponsor. If you need a new home in a numerous number of neighborhoods in Greenville and surrounding areas in Pitt County, Bill Clark can build you a new home.
That's right. We also got to thank Craig Gose and the Greenville Toyota team. If you're looking for a new Toyota or Scion vehicle or a new used car or need any work done on your car, call Craig Gose. They're 321-3000, or you can see them on Memorial Drive End.
That's right. And thank you, Michael, for continuing to sponsor us with the Overton Group.
It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun being part of the show and putting our company out there. We are the Overton Group Real Estate and Property Management Professionals. Got an office in New Bern, which is where I believe you live. Also office here in Greenville. We do commercial real estate, property management, residential real estate, and business brokerage.
That's right.
Well, before we get into the show and get Taylor speaking to us about what he is going to do as U.S. House of Representatives, we need to do a quick commercial break. So we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Greenville Grit. I am Michael Overton, along with my co-host here, Terry Williams. Terry, we have a special guest to my left, Taylor Griffin.
Great to be here.
Thanks
for having me.
You are the candidate for U.S. House of Representatives District 3.
That is correct.
And I know one of the things we talk about on the show is things that affect Greenville. And obviously, this would be your district and your area here if you were elected into the House. So tell us a little bit about who Taylor Griffin is and what caused you to decide to run and where you live and your beliefs. Just kind of give us a summation real quick of who you are.
Sure. Well, I'm from Wilson, North Carolina, not too far from here, so I feel like I'm in the neighborhood here in Greenville. I grew up in Wilson, and I got involved in politics at a fairly early age with Republican candidates. When I was 16 years old, when I first got my driver's license, I was driving around state Senate candidates for the Wilson County Republican Party. And when I went on to college at Appalachian State, after I graduated, I got a great opportunity to go to work in Washington for Senator Jesse Helms. And I worked for Senator Helms, and that led to an opportunity to work for George W. Bush in the White House, which led to an opportunity to work on the 2008 campaign for Governor Sarah Palin. Up in Alaska, actually, which is a lot of fun. And I eventually started my own business, a public relations firm in Washington, D.C., and grew it to about 20 employees and had the opportunity to come back home and to run for office. Sold my interest in the business, and here I am. And the reason that I think this is so important is because I've watched, from my time in Washington, how badly our country has gone off course. And we felt it here in eastern North Carolina. You just take Greenville. Right now they're cutting down the hours for substitute teachers in order to keep from running afoul of Obamacare. So I believe strongly that we need an effective representative that shares our values. And I believe that our current congressman is not meeting that standard. I believe that he has grown ineffective, and I think he's changed since he's been in office. And since I first supported him, and a lot of people first supported him, he's become progressively more aligned with the Democrats. He voted with President Barack Obama more than any other House Republican last year, and I'm not just saying that. The Washington Post has reported that. Congressional Quarterly's reported that. A lot of other news outlets have reported it. And I think that people here are very conservative. They want an effective representative who shares their values. I think that's what we offer, and I think that's what elections are all about. And on May 6th, we'll find out what people most want.
That's right. Well, tell us a little bit, if you would, about how you think differently or believe differently with some of the issues than, say, Walter Jones would. That would be something that would be important to the public.
Well, there are issues that we agree on. I think we both believe that life begins at conception. We both believe that amnesty for illegal aliens is unacceptable. But there are issues where we differ. And a big one is you take food stamps. This is the biggest growth of federal government under the Obama administration. We have gone from spending $37 billion a year on food stamps to spending nearly $80 billion a year on food stamps. 18 million more people are on food stamps now than they were when Barack Obama took office. That's almost 6 or 7% of our federal budget. And so when we look at how we're going to get our country back in order, how we're going to get back on a sustainable fiscal path, this is one of the areas that we certainly need to be looking at. You know, where has it grown? Where have we spent more? And this is one of the big areas where we have. And Republicans offered a fairly reasonable and modest, in my view, reform that would increase the eligibility requirements to make sure that people who were getting food stamps were the people that really needed it. Because I think that we're in real danger, if we haven't already crossed that point, of our social safety net programs no longer being a social safety net but being a hammock. I don't think that serves people who are low income, and it certainly doesn't serve the taxpayer. And so when Republicans offered these measures that would increase the eligibility requirements, that would say if you're receiving food stamps and you're able-bodied and you don't have kids at home to take care of, hey, maybe you should go out and look for a job or get in a worker training program or do something to become a productive member of society again. Walter Jones was one of the only Republicans to vote against that. And I think that is a big difference. I certainly would have voted for it. Did he give a reason
of why he voted against it?
It's the same reason the Democrats gave, because he didn't want people to lose food stamp benefits. And I think that there are too many people on food stamps. I think that we should be growing our economy and creating jobs and creating opportunities for people to fend for themselves, to have the self-worth of having a job, rather than these ever-expanding government programs to take care of people and allow them to sit at home and not be productive members of society, because that's not a very happy existence for anyone.
Well, the food stamp increase went along with unemployment going up, which was lack of creation of new jobs.
Well, don't forget about unemployment benefits.
But it wasn't just that. It wasn't just that. There's about 3 million more people in poverty under Barack Obama than there were when we started. And that part of that is the economy. But the economy started to recover. And we have 18 million more people on food stamps, 6 times the number of people who became impoverished got food stamps. So what happened is we said more people should get food stamps that otherwise, like under Bill Clinton, would not have qualified. And that's just a huge expansion of the federal government, a huge expansion of the welfare state. And what we have learned over and over again in this country as we've had these debates is that does not serve our citizens, and it certainly doesn't serve the taxpayer.
Well, there have been several, switching gears a minute, to people who have said now that Obamacare is in place, it's impossible to repeal it. They think that it just can't happen, that there's too many things already in place, that it would be too much to try to change it back now. So what are your views sort of on that? I mean, I know you can't go to specifics about how you would change it necessarily, but what is your view about...
if you wanted to. It depends on how much patience you have.
Really? But, you know, what is your view about Obamacare, and what instantly, if there are any changes, could be made if you were in Washington?
Well, I do think we need to repeal it. And I don't think we need to ignore the fact that we do have a health care crisis in this country. The problem is that I believe Obamacare is actually making it worse. It's a extremely poorly designed program. So Obamacare is dependent on, for example, a lot of younger people filing for health care that is now more expensive than it would have otherwise been, in order to offset all of the sicker and older people who are now coming into Obamacare. The problem is that's just not happening at the numbers that would be required for it to be financially sustainable. And that could be predicted, because people who are at the margins, who had a hard time paying for health insurance themselves before, certainly, and didn't buy health insurance, certainly when it costs a lot more now. I know for a lot of people, it's my health insurance is about $130 more a month now. For people who are in lower incomes and in sort of just getting by jobs,
Right.
the kind of people you need to enroll, they can't afford that. So we need to look at this differently. So we need to repeal Obamacare, and then we need to take a look at this through the free market. And the way that I would do that, there's a number of ways, but one of the big ones is that we have a system where we basically subsidize health insurance that's provided by employers. It was a system set up in the 1950s when people worked in one job their entire life, and that made a ton of sense in the 1950s. Now people change jobs, and especially because of Obamacare, fewer and fewer companies are offering health insurance, and there is very little help for people who are buying health care themselves. What we need to do is we need to take those big subsidies that we're giving for union health care plans and corporate provided health care plans and say, you know, we'll give you enough of a subsidy to buy a basic level of health insurance. If you want your gold-plated plan, you're not going to get a taxpayer subsidy to do that. And then we need to give a tax benefit and maybe even structured as a tax credit for the people who are lower income that are buying their own health insurance at the individual level to make sure that they can afford health insurance. And then we have the free market working. And what happens when the free market works is companies compete to get lower prices, to reduce costs, and we will be a long way towards solving this. So there are ways to solve it besides the government taking over health care. And Obamacare is sort of this Frankenstein's baby of trying to do a full socialized medicine healthcare plan, single payer system where the government controls healthcare completely, but still trying to keep intact the free market. And the way they've set it up, it's completely incompatible. And it's not going to work. So we have to repeal it now before it becomes a complete and total disaster that we have to bail out.
Well, is there any reason, and I've never really heard people talk about this, but why is the cost of healthcare in America continuing to skyrocket?
Well, there's a few reasons for it. First of all, there's the way we control costs in a free market economy is that there's competition. One person says, I'm going to charge $100 for this, and another person says, no, I figured out a way to do it cheaper. I'm going to charge $80. And the prices come down. Then everybody has to figure out how to do it cheaper. The way we've set up health insurance, those free market forces are not active within the health insurance industry. And so there's no incentive for people to figure out a cheaper way to do it. The incentive is all to figure out the most expensive way you can do it. And people, remember that a lot of people's health insurance is purchased through their companies, and the companies are not as focused on, so health insurance to them may not cost anything, or they receive it through the government. It's like it's free. So those forces are not there within the system. There are a lot of other things we can do to increase market forces within the system. But one big thing that we can do is to empower people at the individual level to purchase their own health insurance and to put the consumer back and their doctors back in charge of their health insurance coverage rather than big companies and the government.
One other big area which Walter supports, and I'm sure that you do too, but I'd like your views on it, is our veterans, our active military and veterans. Can you speak a little bit about your position on what we can do to help our veterans more and what's going on in the military in general?
This should be a top priority for anyone who is serving in Congress in Eastern North Carolina. My granddad was an Army colonel. He was the most important influence in my life. And I know a lot of veterans that have struggled, and I've tried in my spare time to help people out. The Veterans Administration is an absolute mess for people who are trying to apply for the benefits that they are entitled to due to their service to this country. So the first thing that we need to look at in a bigger sense is how do we reform that? How do we make the Veterans Administration more friendly to our veterans and less bureaucratic? But the other part of it is, as a congressman, you have the opportunity to be able to help people with this. A congressman gets a little power, gets to wield a little influence, and as a result, we want to have a team of people that works to help people who are having problems with the current system, as we reform it in the long term, hopefully, get the benefits to which they're entitled. And we'll work very hard on that. We think that's important, and it's a top priority for us.
Okay. Well, it sounds like to me, healthcare is a mess. Veterans Administration's a mess. Food stamps are a mess. Medicare's a mess. Everything needs a complete overhaul.
Yeah, I mean,
I
think
it's just it's discouraging some. So
if I had to pick two things that I feel like that are not just a challenge for our state, but really a challenge for our country, regulations, no doubt, regulations, squeeze, and entitlements.
Absolutely.
Because the more regulations you put on it, the less free enterprise you have. People don't either are discouraged from trying to open up a business or discouraged of trying to take that step. And then the entitlement just, and I know as a Christian, I know that we're supposed to take care of, as the Bible says, the widows and the orphans, and I believe very strongly in that. But the thing about entitlement is that it is such a dangerous slope that once you create that level of dependency, you also, after dependency becomes expectation.
Right.
And trying to pull that back, and whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans, but I feel for those people that are accepting entitlements, and we all are in some form or another. The government's handing stuff out, whether it's subsidies or rebates, or you buy an electric car, you get huge credits back for that. I mean,
exactly.
At some point we got to back off of this drug that we're on, because it's going to completely break our country if we continue to go down that path.
That's what I think is one of the issues. Is initially, I'm sure these programs were set up to help the citizens, but then there's nothing set up to help them get out of it.
Well, it's because
There's
it's
no
used
program.
as a political pawn for votes.
Exactly.
Now.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think that we have to get back to thinking about what is best for the people, not what is best for the politicians. And career politics is a big part of that. And that's why I've said that I'll serve no more than 4 terms in Congress.
I mean, I'd love to see, and this is not just Congress, this is local city council.
Everywhere.
I would love to see term limits
Yes.
on congressmen, on senators, on city council people. You when you're there long enough, if you get involved in something so long, you're going to lose touch. And you can't stay in touch and understand what the fabric of the people are that you represent when you're not even here.
I could not have said it any better. And we don't have term limits right now for the House of Representatives, but I'd say to your listeners and viewers that they have the power to institute term limits at the polls. A big problem in this country is that the power of incumbency is so strong. Once you get in there, once you get the name recognition, it is extremely difficult for someone else to offer different ideas. The founders of our country never intended career politics. Actually, they never imagined that someone would want to serve in the House of Representatives their entire career. They never imagined that.
Right.
And so they didn't put term limits in because they thought, who would want to do that? And for most of the history of the 3rd District, people haven't served more than 2 or 3 terms. It's only very recently that this advent of career politics is we have developed congressional districts that are gerrymandered, so only one party can win one district or another. Congressmen don't have to face real elections anymore. As a result, they are not focused on the needs of their district because they don't have to go around and campaign. They don't have to go around and talk to people because they're going to get elected pretty much no matter what just because of their name ID. I think one of the things that's different here is we've been able to put together a campaign that's giving people a real choice now. People are able to understand where I stand and where my opponent stands and make a decision about what they want for the future of their country. And I would say, regardless of the differences between us, I think that a regular rotation of representatives is imperative for the functioning of a democracy because you have to keep your representatives close to the people they serve.
Well, I know one of the things that get into some of the differences that we as the public here, John Q. Public gets to hear on the radio. The ads are crazy, man. I mean, you've done a great job on your advertising. One of the accusations I've heard, maybe you can speak about, is that you've only recently lived in the District 3. Can you speak to that or give a response to that?
I grew up in Wilson. I have a hard time understanding that particular accusation. I live in Newbern now. I did live in Washington. That's part of the reason that I'm running is because I feel you need the base level of experience to know how to be effective. But you need the common sense to know how broken the system is and how to change it. So it's sort of like when a car's broken and the normal mechanic can't figure it out, maybe it's somebody that thinks about things a little differently that can actually fix it, but they still need to know basics about how the internal combustion engine works, right? So I think that I don't shy away from my experience in Washington. What I'm trying to do is to bring that experience and put it to work for Eastern North Carolina, because this is my home. This is the people and the places I love. This is where I spent my weekends, even when I was in Washington, and where I live now, where I'll always live, God willing, for the rest of my life. And I hope that I'll have an opportunity to serve Eastern North Carolina and to hopefully make some of this stuff better. I tell your listeners out there and people who are watching on TV that you can be part of the solution. You can be part of having a responsive government, but that means voting at the polls on May 6th. Or tomorrow in early voting.
Starts
Early voting
tomorrow.
starts tomorrow.
That's right. It does start tomorrow.
Did you have another question?
Well, I think you've sort of answered it, but we talked a little bit before we started the show today about your accusations that people have made that you were a Washington insider. And I think you've sort of cleared that as, yes, you do know a lot based on your experience and who you've been able to work for. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Well, I'd say I went to Washington to work for Senator Jesse Helms to serve North Carolina, and I got the opportunity to work in the White House for George W. Bush. I worked at the Treasury Department on a team helping to track down terrorist finances and keep our nation safe and stop terrorist attacks by stopping the money, and to work for Governor Sarah Palin. If that's being a Washington insider, I'm proud of it, but I don't think it is. I think that is, I've had that opportunity. It's part of the experience that I've built that I think has prepared me to serve Eastern North Carolina effectively.
So for someone thinking that you don't have any experience as far as being in Congress, you've seen a side of it that would give you lots of clues to how to work with people and how to service.
I interned in the House of Representatives, and I worked both as an intern and as a full-time staffer in the United States Senate. I've seen it from the inside. I know how it works. I'm not particularly impressed by being a congressman. That's not a big deal to me. What is a big deal is to be able to do something for the people that elected me. And I'm really, maybe I'm a little Mr. Smith Goes to Washington here, but I really feel like that if we're going to get our system working again, we've got to start electing new people. George Mason, who's one of the founders of our Constitution, said something once, and I'm paraphrasing here, but that I've always really liked. He said that the regular rotation of representatives is essential to the functioning of a representative democracy, because nothing so impels a man to regard the concerns of his constituents as the certainty of having to go back and live among them with the laws that he made. I think that's extremely important, and that goes for me too. If I'm elected,
That kind of
Good luck
says
to
it
Kay
all.
Hagan when she comes back.
Yeah.
Well, we are going to have to go to a quick commercial break. We'll be right back and wrap it up with Taylor Griffin.
Thank you.
To the Greenville Grit, Michael Overton here with co-host Terry Williams and U.S. House of Representatives candidate Taylor Griffin. Again, Taylor, well, first we got to thank our sponsors. We've not been
One more
really
time.
good about that at the end of the show, but
I know.
thank you again, Bill Clark Holmes and Greenville Toyota and the Overton
Overton
Group
Group.
for being a part of this. Taylor, take a minute or so. Tell the voters why you're the best choice for U.S. House of Representatives and what you'll do to represent them.
Well, I think we can all agree that things aren't going so great in this country and that we need to do something different. So I'd say the first argument that I would make is that you have to do something different. There has to be a change. We have to have fresh ideas and new blood in the Congress to get this country back on the right track. I think my opponent is a career politician. He's been in politics for 30 years. I think that's probably long enough. And in recent years, he's shifted away from the conservative values of Eastern North Carolina. He voted, like I said earlier, with Barack Obama more than any other House Republican. If that's a good thing for you, then you have the choice to vote for him. But if you would prefer a principled conservative who will work day and night for Eastern North Carolina, who will work for your values, I've already put 25,000 miles on my car campaigning. I'm driving everywhere every day. If you want someone who's going to be there for you, going to be with you, and to work with you to make Eastern North Carolina a better place, to create jobs, to repeal Obamacare, to get our country back on track, then I hope you'll vote for me.
Well, thank you for saying that. I know we've got a couple minutes left, and one of the things I wanted to do too is we've got some of the other races. Early
That's
voting
right.
does start tomorrow, and the primary itself is May 6th.
May
Is that
6th.
correct? So I know I want to throw a couple of endorsements out.
Sure.
The district court judge race is 3 candidates. 2 of them are going to go beyond the primary and
That's
run in
right.
November. I know Lee Teague, and I've known Lee
So do
for a while. He goes to my church. He's one of my brother-in-law's best friends, and just a wonderful guy, wonderful family guy. And the Daily Reflectors endorsed him, and
Right.
and I can tell you with district court. I mean, I know in past when I go into to vote, you don't really know who a lot of the people are. So I'm giving my vote on this one to Lee Teague. And you and I may disagree on this some. I don't really know, Taylor, where you stand on what you want to put in. But I would say on the U.S. Senate side, I've got a family friend in Tom Tillis. I've known Tom now for a year and a half, probably at least 2 years, and I've gotten to know him really well. So I can speak from knowing him on a personal level. He
Right.
is a great guy, and I think he's been an extremely effective Speaker of the
Yes.
House for North Carolina.
They've got a big debate tonight, 7 o'clock. It'll be on, I guess, on WRL, but it's in Raleigh.
Yep.
Between the U.S. Senate Republican U.S. Senate candidates. So Mark Harris, who, his brother is a friend of my husband's, so I've gotten to meet him a little bit,
Right.
know a little bit about him, and I think he's a fine man too. I do not know the other candidate, so
Well, and
really
we can't
speak to
forget
that.
either about Neil Elks.
That's right.
Again, even though he does not technically have competition, the competition's name is on the ballot. So you
That's
still
right.
got to vote for Neil if you're interested in being a part. Do you have anyone you want to pitch or
Well,
support?
I would say that it is that we need pay attention to these local races.
Right.
Pay attention to these judicial races. It's very easy to pay attention to the Senate races and the House races at the federal level, but the people who impact your life are the county commissioners, the mayors, the judges, the school board members. Pay attention to those races, learn about them. That's where you should spend a lot of your effort.
Right, exactly. Well, I think it's also important to realize, even on your level of running in the federal, that it all affects us. We ought to be more inclined to get out and vote. That's the biggest thing. We have a lot of people who just don't participate in their right to vote. So I'm encouraging everybody to get out and
Yeah,
vote.
get out and vote. This is a big election.
You
too.
can do it tomorrow.
That's
you
right.
can early
Start
vote.
tomorrow.
You can early vote starting tomorrow, and you've got a couple weeks to do that. And then
Okay.
the main event, May 6th.
Well,
great.
Taylor, again, thank you so
much for being with us.
Just for
Oh,
taking
my
your
pleasure.
time.
It's
Good
been
luck
great.
in this race. I know it's been exhausting, but you've run, from what I can tell, a great race. So,
Been a whole lot of fun.
all right.
I'm
Well, look,
grateful
thank you
every
for
minute of
joining
it.
us, and we will see you next week.